Welcome to the second session on the social teachings of the Church and political science. In this second session, after we have seen the Church actually coming against the two extremes of economic theory, that is the controlled economy or the communist economy, and the liberal economy or the capitalist economy, we are now going to look at the mixed economy or the principle that should underline a mixed economy within the sphere of the social doctrine of the Church. This is quite an important area. In this session, obviously, we will be a bit more theoretical, unfortunately, than the session previous, precisely because we need to first understand some fundamental principles of the social doctrine of the Church. And there are effectively four important notions that we will deal in this session. The concept of human dignity, the concept of the common good, the issue of poverty and social exclusion, and therefore the important principle that emerges for the Church called the preferential option for the poor, and the concept of the universal destination of goods, that whatever is in the world is not just for one person, but has a universal destination for all of us. Interestingly, however, before we actually talk about these important concepts, when you look at the compendium of the Church on the social doctrine, the first chapter actually deals with a spiritual dimension, because at the end of the day, the Church is not really exclusively concerned with how we have a good economic order, but is really concerned with the spiritual journey each and every one of us is actually walking in this world. So it's important for the Church, the spiritual dimension. And therefore it takes its time to talk to us about God's plan of love for humanity. And this is where also it emerges the important principle of human dignity, because we are all children of God. That Jesus Christ is the fulfillment of God's plan of love. That therefore the human person is part of God's plan, and that God's plan also is transmitted through the mission of the Church itself. In essence, what the Church is telling us is that it is not about an economic or political system. Life is not just about an economic and political system. But the context is that we need to understand who we are, why we are here, why have we been created, and also how this dimension influences our choices, actions, and social behavior. So, as we read in the compendium, human activity, when it aims at promoting the integral dignity and vocation of every person, the quality of living conditions, and the meeting in solidarity of people and nations, is in accordance with God's plan. So that we create a positive social order in society that includes the political and economic sphere, that is also part of God's plan for us. But the place to start for every Catholic in society is our encounter with Jesus. And this is something that Pope Francis, in his teachings, is consistently reminding us of. If we talk merely about our social responsibilities in society, merely from a dogmatic, from a theoretical or an academic sort of approach, and forget that all this has to be born from our encounter with Jesus, then clearly we are losing our battle, because we know that these concepts in reality go slightly against, if not a bit more than slightly against, human nature. We are not so easily open to show solidarity. Probably we are a bit more concerned with our own personal well-being than that of others. And therefore only our transformation, our being close to God and to Jesus, that we are able to do this. And in Evangelii Gaudium, actually Pope Francis says, thanks solely to this encounter, or renewed encounter with God's love, which blossoms into an enriching friendship, we are liberated from our narrowness and self-absorption, and we become fully human when we become more than human, when we let God bring us beyond ourselves in order to attain the fullest truth of our being. Here we find the inspiration of all our efforts at evangelization, for we have received the love which restores meaning to our lives. How can we then fail to share that love with others? So Pope Francis clearly touches the core issue. In reality, we cannot live the social teachings of the Church unless we encounter Jesus, because only then our heart will overflow with love for others. And this comes also in other teachings, so it's not just like Pope Francis came up with this, but also Pope Benedict XVI in 2009 in Caritas Vita again emphasizes this point and says, only through an encounter with God we are able to see in the other something more than just another creature, to recognize the divine image of each other. So what Pope Benedict is telling us is that when we have an encounter with God, then we see others in completely different dimension, because we see them no longer as other people, no longer as the poor, the migrants, the workers, whatever class you want to put people in, but you see them as your brothers and sisters. And this is what transforms us into becoming more of a caring society. So the cornerstone of the social teachings of the Church is precisely this basic principle: human dignity, that we are actually created, as in Genesis 1:26 we read, we are created by God when God said, let us make humankind in our image according to our likeness. And therefore, we are all of us in the likeness of God. Whatever race, whatever age, whatever color, whatever social background, from wherever we came, we are all brothers and sisters, because we are all children of God. And therefore, the fundamental principle of the social teachings of the Church is precisely this concept of human dignity, which was a concept, again, clearly affirmed in the first encyclical we referred to also in our previous discussion, Rerum Novarum in 1891, where clearly in Rerum Novarum we read that God created us in God's image. We are all children of God, irrespective of our race, of our sex, level of intelligence, cultural, social background, economic affluence, irrespective. We are all sacred. We are all children of God. And therefore, we all have, and here I quote, inherent and inviolable dignity of the human person. Every human person has his rights, his inalienable rights, because we are all sacred. And this has continued to be affirmed by a number of popes in various encyclicals. If even we read Evangelii Vitae by Pope Paul II in 1995, he again affirms this important value. Man, he says, living man is the glory of God. Man has been given a sublime dignity based on the intimate bond which unites him to his Creator. In man then shines forth a reflection of God himself. So the Church, all that it talks about is precisely this fundamental value, that man is at the center of the Church concern. And man should be the center of the concern of any economic theorist, political activist, whoever is working within the sphere. If we put aside man and just look at the economy, then we are actually doing disservice to humanity, because it is precisely the person that is central to whatever we are discussing. And therefore, this is why also the Church speaks about rights, that the person has inalienable rights, which means you cannot take them away. The rights that emerge from the fact that we are all children of God and therefore we are all equal in the eyes of God cannot be taken away. And therefore, the right to have a family, the right to have work, the right to actually have dignity, the right to be respected, these are all the rights which come out from the fact that we are children of God and we deserve this. And this comes also clearly in the Vatican Council II document, Gaudium Express, which also speaks clearly about these rights of humanity, which it's interesting eventually emerged to be also the human rights that have been also advocated internationally and adopted by the Convention of the United Nations in 1948. And the Church also makes reference to these rights and sees them as an extraordinary opportunity that our modern times effectively offer. So the Church looks very positively at the fact that the United Nations, the world, even in other continents like in Europe, we also have the European Convention of Human Rights, because these conventions actually crystallize the rights of people that need to be respected. Unfortunately, despite the world having established these sort of documents, still in the world today, we see a lot of people whose rights are not respected. We still see people in the world who are poor, migrants who are traveling away from their countries because of the realities that they are facing, the injustices they are facing, and therefore, despite the Church calling human rights a milestone in the path of humanity's moral progress, 70 years from those rights, we still see a lot of people who are not being given proper rights. And the world is still discarding a lot of human beings. Pope Francis uses a very important phrase. He says that today we live in a throw-away culture. We throw away people, whatever that might be, whether it is life itself, murder, genocide, abortion, euthanasia, we throw away people. We see conflicts in Africa, in Asia, in the Middle East, of ethnic cleansing. We've seen ISIS killing people because they are not of the same religion, not just Christians, but also Muslims that do not come within the same religious family. We throw away people. Abortion that has killed millions of human beings. It is estimated that in the US alone, since 1974, over 60 billion children have been killed through abortion. The fact that we do not show integrity to people, to human persons, such as we see torments inflicted on body and mind, coercion, forcing people to do things. We also insult human dignity when we leave people in inhumane conditions. The poor, deportation. In the world we still find slavery, especially of children in labor camps, prostitution, human trafficking. So these are all, in reality, discards of human being in our world today, despite 70 years of affirming that there are human rights. And here also John Paul II in Evangelii Vitae clearly depicts this reality. The social teachings of the Church therefore try to counter this throwaway culture by clearly emphasizing the need of putting back at the center human dignity. Now, why does our culture throw away so easily people? Because our culture dehumanizes the individual. Stop calling a person and you will throw him away. Call a person a migrant and you don't give him importance. Call a baby in the womb of the mother a fetus, and so it's not a human being. We dehumanize. We stop calling people for who they are. Human individuals, our brothers and sisters. We call them something else. We call the poor people who are trying to live off other people. And therefore we do not show concern for the poor. So we shut our eyes. We ignore the pleas of these people, and we also exert violence against them. And this is precisely what the Catholic social teaching tries to counter. And this is why the principle of human dignity is so important. And this is why, for example, the Church is also against capital punishment, against abortion, because precisely in whatever stage of life the person is, he deserves human dignity. But for the Church, human dignity is not just about being against abortion, so before the human being comes into this world independently, or respecting the elderly and so being against euthanasia. We do not kill the old. But for the Church, human dignity is about our whole life, from when we are born to when we die. So the important issues of fighting poverty, fighting injustice, because also poverty and injustice goes against human dignity, and therefore the Church emphasizes a moral vision to society. And this is why morality remains important within the context of the economy and politics around the economy. So, in Solidates Socialis, Pope John Paul II says, at stake is the dignity of the human person, whose defense and promotion have been entrusted to us by the Creator. We have all been entrusted and given the responsibility for those around us. And for the Church, the dimension of those around us is more than simply our neighbor, but it is actually the whole of humanity. We have a collective responsibility for each other. And therefore, human dignity implies solidarity, that we show solidarity to other people, economic justice, and the economy should therefore, which we will discuss further, be concerned with the common good, and we will try to understand what is the common good. With authentic human development, that means that we should be concerned with developing each other's capabilities, so the importance of education. The preferential option for the poor, so in our political thinking, our main concern should be the poor. So if there are still millions of people poor in the world, it is estimated that there are 1 billion people poor in the world today. Our main concern should be them. Nobody should be in poverty. And also care for the creation. And I think this Pope has also given a lot of emphasis to the issue, also with the publication of the encyclical Laudate Si, which clearly speaks about the importance of the environment and creation. So first we saw the principle of human dignity. Why it is fundamental? Because we are all brothers and sisters coming from God. From that comes a second important principle which we want to talk about today, which is the common good. The common good is a social condition that promotes the human dignity of all persons, not one or two, of everyone. That's why it is common good. And therefore, if we're talking from a political sphere, our concern as politicians, of policymakers, is how will we help every individual to flourish and to reach his full potential? Then we are actually talking of the common good. And this is a dimension which is much bigger than the circle that is just around us, as I said, like our family or our nation. But as Vatican Council II say, the common good is a concern of the whole creation, of all of humanity, of our globe, of all the world. Something which today we are seeing great difficulties. Global warming, we know, is the impact of wrong choices being made by humanity in terms of pollution. So when we pollute, there are consequences we are sinning against all of humanity. So this is the concept of the common good. So the common good is not the total of all social conditions, nor is it what is good for most people. In democracies, the majority. That is not the common good. The common good is the greatest good of all. Everyone has to be concerned under our concern. If we're only concerned with the majority, with the votes we get as politicians, then we're not concerned with children, because children do not vote. We're not concerned with probably the old people in bed who cannot come out to vote, but our responsibility is for all. The unborn child, the poor, the children, those who are all disadvantaged. That is the common good. So the common good is the basis of all our association. This is why we come together, because we realized as societies, and this is why humans are called social beings, because we look for each other. We know that when we cooperate, we can do something better. That is something humanly we have discovered through time, that we are stronger together than if we are alone. And this is what the Church is trying to affirm, that we should not be living in isolation or retreated from others, but we should be together to seek the common good together. If we work together, then we can increase the good of society. There are effectively three elements to the concept of common good. The first is the respect for other people. So here again, it ties to human dignity. But even the respect of other people by authorities. So now we are taking it a step further. Not just respecting each other, but even the state is obliged to respect the individual and looks at the individual as having his own vocation. This is why, therefore, the Church finds difficulty with communism, because communism does not respect the individual's vocation, purpose for life, that each of us has the freedom to do what actually makes him a better person, the right to have our own conscience, freedom of religion, and also the freedom of expressing our feelings. So respecting others is a very important fundamental value. So states are required to respect to respect the individual. Effectively, they are there to represent the individual. So if they're there to represent him, they need to respect him. The second important principle is social well-being and development. Not just of the group, but everyone in the group. And social development includes accessibility to food, water. Today, a lot of countries in Africa, in South America, in Asia, still have no access to water, to basic needs, health, clothing, work. All this gives human dignity. And the common good is all about giving human dignity to everyone, but also about giving peace, stability, and security. And that is why we need a state, because the state is there to guarantee peace, stability, and security, and therefore having a just moral order. So the state in itself is not there to be the dominant force of society, but is there to help society reach the common good. And therefore it is wrong when the state tries to absorb the individual, to become more important than the human person himself. Again, this is unfortunately some of the notions here, the Church countering the concepts of socialism, because socialism tends to put the state, the objectives of the state, before the people. And there we come at times in conflict